The entire government narrative about Epstein, as in the idea that there's no further guilty parties, no one else deserving of prosecution, and that the case should be effectively shut down, that entire narrative just went up in smoke. I'm not exactly sure why the DOJ and the FBI are choosing to release the documents this way, drip feeding them in separate batches, even though they've obviously prepped a lot of them beforehand. But whatever the reason may be, and despite the fact that the first few batches hardly contained anything of notable impact, what they just released in batch 8 of the files completely destroys the reputation of the current administration. Let's go back in time. This entire thing started with a joint DOJ FBI memo. This memo, right here, basically said, there's nothing else to see, the investigation is over, and most importantly, quote, we did not uncover evidence that could predicate an investigation against uncharged third parties, end quote. Nobody believed that. Regardless of whether or not there was public proof, the idea that Jeffrey Epstein was alone in his crimes felt ridiculous. We knew that Ghislaine Maxwell had been convicted, but the commonly accepted zeitgeist, if you will, as it relates to Jeffrey Epstein, was that he operated a trafficking empire, catering that empire to the rich and the powerful. That sort of common perception wasn't based on nothing, by the way. It was based on testimony, an abundance of victim testimony, actually. As an example, here's a quote from case 80736, Jane Doe 1 and Jane Doe 2 versus the United States, which says, quote, Epstein also trafficked the minor Jane Doe, making her available for sex to politically connected and financially powerful people. Epstein's purposes in lending Jane Doe, along with other young girls, to such powerful people were to ingratiate himself with them for business, personal, political, and financial gain, as well as to obtain potential blackmail information, end quote. The list of similar testimony is long, very long. That's just one example, but that's not the main purpose of the video. The real purpose of this video, after once again establishing that there is a very good reason why the commonly accepted narrative is what it is, the real purpose of the video is to showcase that the government has now obliterated their own constructed narrative. This right here is the DOJ portal for the new Epstein files. Most of it doesn't matter, but the transparency section, that does matter. Because Congress compelled them to release what they have, and the political pressure on top of the scrutiny is through the roof right now. Everything they do is being analyzed. If they make any mistakes, people see it immediately. And my personal guess is that at least a few moderately ranking administration officials will be used as patsies. But regardless, over the span of just a couple of days, December 19th through the 23rd, just in time for Christmas, the US government began releasing batches of documents and making them available to the public. I've already talked about batches 1 through 4 in a prior video. It's part of the playlist. It's all linked down below. It's a shit show, certainly, but more so because of the way that they're doing it, not so much because of what the documents contained. However, document batch 8 is where it goes off the rails completely, because what they have now shown is utterly damning, totally contradicts pretty much every single thing that ranking law enforcement representatives have been saying recently, and makes it obvious that whether or not they want to prosecute now, at one point in time, there were at least 10 suspected co-conspirators of Jeffrey Epstein, multiple co-conspirators being offered what's called Proffer agreements, and lastly, the current administration is not just redacting victim information, they're redacting the names and information of suspected co-conspirators. It's not just a meme anymore. It's a government protecting the pedophiles. Let's get to some documents. I'll start with this, 18586. This is a search and seizure warrant signed by New York Judge Gabriel Gorenstein. Just to be clear, obtaining a warrant requires probable cause. It's not a hunch or a suspicion. It has to be actionable, enough to convince a judge to put their own name on it. And in this warrant, on page 6, after describing what evidence they're looking for on suspicion of various trafficking charges, on page 6, we see, quote, evidence concerning the identity or location of co-conspirators of Jeffrey Epstein, including blank and Ghislaine Maxwell, as well as down below, evidence concerning communications to, from, by, and or among co-conspirators of Jeffrey Epstein, including blank and Ghislaine Maxwell, end quote. This is a suspected co-conspirator of Jeffrey Epstein whose name is being withheld. Not a victim, a co-conspirator. But even if you assume a mistake was made, this person somehow turned out to be a victim as well after time or new information, acting under duress or coercion, even if you make every reasonable effort to believe that this redaction is justified, it gets so much worse from here, to a point where no one should be able to sit there and defend this government. Let's move on. Next is this, an email chain from 2019. Quote, good morning, blank. ASC blank is requesting an update on the 10 co-conspirators by close of business today. Can you tell us how many have successfully been located/interviewed/served with grand jury subpoenas? I believe the breakdown was 5 in New York, 1 in North Carolina, 1 in Boston, and 3 in Florida. Please let me know if you need anything from us, end quote. And then, in response, the critical part, quote again, of the 10 co-conspirators, 3 have been located in Florida and served grand jury subpoenas. 1 in Boston, 1 in New York City, and 1 in Connecticut were located and served. 4 of the 10 are outstanding with attempts having been made. 1 is a wealthy businessman in Ohio. A lead is being sent to CV. The remaining 3 are currently out of pocket. End quote. We're supposed to believe, because the current administration is politically vulnerable to all of this, we're supposed to believe that Jeffrey Epstein not only had 0 co-conspirators beyond Ghislaine Maxwell, who now sits in a cushy prison camp after getting a special waiver from this government, not only do we have 0 additional co-conspirators, but he also never had any clients. The current government narrative is that Epstein did this basically alone, for himself, by himself, and no one else. Don't ask questions, don't make waves, it's all a Democrat hoax. And yet, here we have concrete evidence that at one point in time, the FBI was investigating 10 co-conspirators, obtaining search and seizure warrants to that end, and is now redacting the names of those co-conspirators from the files. Let's keep going, okay? Email from July 7th, 2019, on a thread literally called Co-conspirators, okay? Quote, blank does not need to head out. We made contact with blank last night in New York. Contact was made with blank, blank, and blank. Attempts were made to blank and Brunel. Blank is confirmed to live in New York, but was away for the holiday weekend. We did not have a good address for blank, but attempt was made at a residence in New York. Attempts to Maxwell are being made in Boston today. Blank will be approached in Florida and blank in New York, but haven't as of yet. I do not know about Ohio contacting Wexner, end quote. There is no possible way that all of these people turned out to be victims. The wealthy businessman in Ohio is not a victim or a survivor of Jeffrey Epstein. Maybe he's a victim of blackmail, but these names being withheld is not protecting the victims. It's protecting the rich and the powerful and the associates of Jeffrey Epstein. How about more? Subject memos in 2020. Quote, memo on co-conspirators we could potentially charge the Monday after Epstein's death, delivered that Wednesday. 7 pages, co-conspirator update memo, December, 86 pages. Corporate prosecution memo, December, 13 pages, never discussed. Prosecution memo, April, 26 pages, hasn't been discussed in the 3 weeks since we sent it. Perjury NM memo will be another 30 pages, end quote. At one point in time, internally, the FBI had a list of co-conspirators. Not just a list, also. They had co-conspirators that they were about to potentially charge. And yet, flash forward to now, and we're supposed to shut up, stop asking who, or why not, and accept the preposterous narrative that there's no further crimes, no third parties who deserve investigation, no one else is involved, and that the current administration is squeaky clean. Best there ever was. Here's another one. This is an email rundown of activities in August of 2019 with 2 important sections that read, quote, next week, the team hopes to travel to Florida for 2 meetings subject to weather issues arising from Hurricane Dorian. First, we hope to meet with blank for her second proffer. Blank worked as an assistant to Epstein in 2004, reporting to blank. Her duties included scheduling 2 to 3 massages for Epstein each day he was in Florida, end quote. And then further down, quote again, on September 6th, we are scheduled to meet with blank defense counsel for an attorney proffer, end quote. And just so everyone's clear on this, proffer agreements are typically off-the-record interviews where the government agrees not to prosecute based on what you say, but these typically happen when the person has first-hand knowledge of or actually themselves committed crimes. Leaning into the angle of proffer agreements in particular, we can see this email from October 2019, quote, co-conspirators, blank attorney proffer scheduled on 10/18/19, Ghislaine Maxwell attorney proffer on 10/8/19, blank attorney proffer on 10/7/19, proffer with blank scheduled for 10/11/19, blank, nothing further scheduled at this time, blank, cooperating, 2 proffers have been conducted, end quote. Now, I know what some people are about to say. Proffer agreements and cooperating witnesses shouldn't necessarily be made public because they helped in the case, and that's true. But we're supposed to believe that every single person in Epstein's entire orbit simultaneously turned on him, and that all of them now deserve to have all of their information fully redacted because the rats jumped off the sinking ship? Is that it? That's the narrative that we're now supposed to believe? Lately, I've seen a lot of comments about how if there was any evidence, it's long been destroyed by one administration or another because both different parties have assumed power in the White House over that span of time. And that may be true. That likely is true. However, we're not just looking for evidence of convictions or for convictions. We're also looking for evidence that they're lying. Being told, shut up and don't ask questions, which is precisely what the president has now done repeatedly, isn't a valid response when you're talking about a criminal like Jeffrey Epstein. This administration right now is lying. So even if we don't get new guilty parties and a literal client list typed up on a crisp white sheet of paper, what people are looking for is vindication that they're not wrong. That type of vindication is extremely likely at this point because the current administration's incompetence is legendary. Look at this. This is a redacted PDF with redactions that are illegal, by the way, because they have absolutely nothing to do with protecting victims. But down on page 37 to 40, we find these paragraphs, all blacked out. Yeah, if you copy and paste all of the text, like if you just drag around all of it, because they didn't flatten the PDF after the redactions, the text comes out from behind the black boxes. It's not actually redacted properly is what I'm saying. So we can actually read what these people were cutting out of the files and compare it to what they've been saying. Here's what it says when you paste it in, right? Into a blank document. Quote, 203. Defendants also attempted to conceal their criminal sex trafficking and abuse conduct by paying large sums of money to participant witnesses, including by paying for their attorney's fees and case costs in litigation related to this conduct. 204. Epstein also threatened harm to victims and helped release damaging stories about them to damage their credibility when they tried to go public with their stories of being trafficked and sexually abused. 205. Epstein also instructed one or more Epstein Enterprise participant witnesses to destroy evidence relevant to ongoing court proceedings involving defendants' criminal sex trafficking and abuse conduct. End quote. Why is that redacted? Anybody? Why is that taken out? It has precisely nothing to do with protecting victims. It has precisely nothing to do with personally identifiable information even, and yet it's all blacked out. Because why? This is a government exhibit in the case against Jeffrey Epstein, and yet statements about him bribing witnesses or paying for their attorney's fees while a bunch of his co-conspirators go and secure Proffer agreements, all of that, and him having evidence deleted even, is all redacted. The level of incompetence knows no bounds. In the latest data dump, the DOJ quite literally published a fake video of camera footage inside Epstein's cell, which didn't have a working camera in there, and then pulled it down after realizing that it was just a manufactured 3D render, which someone had emailed to the FBI asking, "Is this real?" and never got a response. There were no cameras in the cell, and yet the DOJ included a fake 3D render from inside that was made by a YouTuber and published on 4chan 5 years ago. I've seen comments about how if there was anything real, we would never see it because the people working on this are too smart, which honestly makes me laugh. File batches 1 through 7 honestly didn't have much. They had photos of Bill Clinton, sure, a lot of them, but not much in the way of optically damaging documents. However, batch 8, that's a different story. Despite the incompetence, the botched redactions, the fake video, batch 8 has so much politically toxic material in it, like so much of it. The DOJ had to preemptively come out before the entire thing on social media and say, quote, "Some of these documents contain untrue and sensationalist claims made against President Trump that were submitted to the FBI right before the 2020 election. To be clear, the claims are unfounded and false, and if they had a shred of credibility, they certainly would have been weaponized against President Trump already." End quote. Wow, guys, really? They didn't say which documents are like that. Maybe it's the memo about how Trump flew on the plane, Epstein's plane, quote, "far more than previously reported." But that's an internal email, so probably not that. Maybe it's the intake reports about how Trump was directly responsible for abuse or something like that. Maybe that's the sensationalist stuff that they have to get out ahead of and tell the whole world, don't believe anything in these files. Or maybe it's something else entirely. But what I can say for sure is that we're still just a tiny fraction of the way through these files, right? And all of them, all batch 1 through 8 is just a tiny fraction of the total to begin with, right? The current administration was compelled to release these. They didn't want to. They fought tooth and nail against it every single breath that they had. And even with the time, the money, the personnel, and the motive, all the redactions, the special redaction project, they haven't been able to keep a single story straight. And the narrative that they built for the past 8 or so months is totally imploding right now. Still not done with the coverage overall, obviously. Plenty more after this, I would expect, depending on how they release the files or what or when or what it says. But probably taking a break for the holidays now at the very least, so that's it. If you want to support the channel, check out the links down below. A special VPN deal, locals and Patreon, channel memberships, and more, but I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, thank you all for watching, question everything, and have a nice night.